Treffin's cybernetic legs whirred softly as he shifted his weight, trying to find a comfortable position at the grimy bar. His fur, once a lustrous blue-black, was now streaked with gray around his muzzle and large, bat-like ears. The celestial pit was never a pleasant place, but tonight it felt particularly oppressive. The air was thick with the mingled scents of various alien species and the acrid smoke from unfiltered stimulants. He was about to leave when a raucous screech cut through the usual din of the bar. Then, I showed that human what we really think of their god of war reputation. Treffin's ears swiveled towards the sound. He turned to see a young Avisima named Nextier, his iridescent feathers gleaming under the bar's harsh lights. Nextier's bulky, gorilla-like body was covered in a mix of colorful plumage and coarse hair, with powerful arms ending in clawed hands. A crowd had gathered around him, drawn in by his loud proclamations. "Tell us again, Nextier. How did you do it?" one of the onlookers urged. Nextier's sharp beak clacked in what passed for a smug grin among his species. It was almost too easy, he bragged, puffing out his chest feathers. The human was lying there in the medical facility, all helpless in its coma. The guards were so focused on external threats, they never thought to look inside. A ripple of nervous laughter spread through the crowd. Treffin felt his fur stand on end, a primal reaction to the growing anxiety in his gut. I slipped in, quiet as a shadow. Nextier continued, clearly relishing the attention. His powerful arms gesticulated wildly as he spoke. One quick slash with these talons and poof. The almighty human was nothing more than a lifeless sack of meat. The crowd murmured, a mix of awe and fear in their various vocalizations. "But weren't you afraid?" someone asked. "The humans they're known to be." "Dangerous," Nextier screeched, flapping his wing-like arms. "Please, that's nothing but propaganda. You've all bought into the myth of the human gods of war. Well, I'm here to tell you it's a lie. They're soft, vulnerable, and now, thanks to me, the galaxy knows it." Treffin's cybernetic legs creaked as he gripped the bar tighter, his claws leaving marks in the worn surface. He knew all too well the folly of underestimating humans. His missing organic legs were a constant reminder. As Nextier launched into another retelling of his glorious deed, hopping from one foot to another in excitement, Treffin found himself torn between the urge to flee and the need to warn this foolish youngster. The last time humans had come seeking revenge, half a sector had burned. And now, listening to Nextier's boasts, Treffin couldn't shake the feeling that something far worse was coming. His whiskers twitched nervously as he contemplated what horrors might soon befall them all. Treffin had heard enough. His cybernetic legs whirred to life as he pushed himself away from the bar, the sound drawing a few curious glances. He made his way through the crowd, his ears flattened against his skull in determination. As he approached, Nextier was in the middle of another boastful reenactment, his wing arms spread wide. And then Silence. Treffin's voice cut through the air like a plasma blade, startling the gathered aliens into instant quiet. Even Nextier, mid-screech, snapped his beak shut in surprise. Treffin's cybernetic legs clicked against the floor as he stepped into the circle. His fur bristled, making him appear larger than he was. "You fool," he growled, his eyes locked on Nextier. "You have no idea what you've done." Nextier ruffled his feathers, indignant. "Who are you to interrupt me, old one? Can't you see I'm educating these fine folks about the true nature of humans?" A low, humorless chuckle escaped Treffin's throat. "Educating? No, young Avisima. You're sentencing them to death." He turned to address the crowd, his voice grave. "All of you who've heard this idiot's tale, leave. Now, get as far away from this place and him as you can." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the gathering. Nextier hopped forward, his massive arms swinging. "What nonsense is this? Are you some human sympathizer?" Treffin's ears twitched in irritation. "I am a survivor, you arrogant fledgling." And these, he rapped his knuckles against one of his cybernetic legs, producing a hollow clang, are a reminder of what happens when you underestimate humans. The crowd grew quiet, all eyes on Treffin's mechanical limbs. "You think you've won some great victory," Treffin continued, his voice low and intense. You've just painted a target on all our backs. Humans. They have a concept called revenge. It drives them beyond reason, beyond self-preservation. They will come for you, next tier, and they won't care who gets in their way. Next tier's feathers drooped slightly, but he quickly puffed them up again. You're just trying to scare us. One human is dead. What can they do? Treffin's eyes narrowed. The last time I saw a human seeking revenge, half a sector burned. Entire species were wiped out. And that was for the death of a human's pet. He paused, letting the words sink in. What do you think they'll do for one of their own? A tense silence fell over the celestial pit. Treffin could see fear creeping into the eyes of the gathered aliens. Leave, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Leave now, while you still can. Because when they come, and they will come, there will be nowhere in this galaxy that's safe. With that, Treffin turned and began to walk away, the whir of his cybernetic legs echoing in the stunned silence. As he reached the door, he heard the first sounds of panic beginning to spread through the crowd. Treffin stepped out into the night, his fur standing on end. He knew it was already too late. Somewhere out there, a human was coming. And there was nothing more deadly than a human seeking what they called revenge. The celestial pit erupted into chaos as Treffin's words sank in. Aliens of all species scrambled towards the exits, their various appendages scrabbling for purchase on the grimy floor. The air filled with a cacophony of screeches, bellows, and chittering as panic took hold. Treffin stood just outside, his sensitive ears twitching at the commotion. He watched as the bar emptied, a veritable menagerie of alien life spilling out into the neon-lit streets of the spaceport. Many were already making calls on their comm devices, arranging immediate departures from the planet. Amidst the fleeing crowd, Next Tier stumbled out, his feathers ruffled and his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and growing fear. The young Avicima's earlier bravado had evaporated, replaced by a dawning realization of the gravity of his actions. You, Next Tier screeched, pointing a clawed finger at Treffin. This is your fault. You've ruined everything. Treffin's cybernetic legs whirred as he turned to face the agitated alien. No, fledgling, you did this to yourself. And to all of us his voice was heavy with resignation. For a moment it seemed Next Tier might lunge at Treffin, his powerful arms tensing. But then a distant boom echoed across the spaceport, the sound of a ship making an emergency departure. The noise seemed to jolt Next Tier back to reality. I need to leave, Next Tier muttered, his earlier confidence now a distant memory. He turned and began to half run, half fly down the street, disappearing into the panicked crowd. Treffin watched him go, a grim expression on his furred face. He knew running was futile. The humans would find Next Tier, no matter where he fled. With a sigh, Treffin activated his wrist-mounted holoprojector. A small drone materialized, its anti-grav units humming softly. Follow the Avicima, Treffin instructed the drone. Keep him in sight, but remain undetected. Transmit his location to me continuously. As the drone zipped away, Treffin turned his attention skyward. He tapped a few commands into his projector, linking it to the spaceport's traffic control systems. If when a human ship arrived, he'd know. For hours, Treffin watched and waited. The spaceport, usually a hub of activity, grew eerily quiet as news of the impending danger spread. Ships departed in droves, their engines painting the night sky with streaks of light. But Next Tier, perhaps paralyzed by fear or unable to secure passage, remained planetside. Treffin's drone reported that the Avicima had holed up in an abandoned warehouse, alternating between fits of panic and bouts of delusional bravado. As the first sun of the binary system began to peek over the horizon, Treffin's wrist unit suddenly blared an alert. An unregistered ship had just entered the atmosphere, broadcasting no identification and ignoring all hails from traffic control. Treffin's fur stood on end. They were here. His cybernetic legs carried him swiftly to a nearby rooftop, offering a clear view of the spaceport and the surrounding area. In the distance, he could see a sleek, black ship descending rapidly, far faster than safety protocols allowed. The human had arrived, and with them, the promise of vengeance. Treffin's ears flattened against his skull as he watched the ship disappear behind a row of buildings, in the general direction of next tier's hiding place. A sense of dread washed over him. The hunt was about to begin. The human dropship slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force, its landing struts groaning under the impact. Trefin, watching from his vantage point, winced at the reckless landing. The ship's hull glowed red-hot from the rapid atmospheric entry, steam hissing as it touched the cool morning air. For a moment, everything was still. Then, with a hydraulic hiss, the ship's hatch burst open. A lone figure emerged, clad in matte black armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. The human's face was hidden behind a featureless helmet, but Trefin could feel the rage emanating from the figure even at this distance. The human paused, head swiveling as if scanning the area. Then, with purposeful strides, it began to move towards the warehouse district where next tier was hiding. Trefin's wrist unit chirped softly, confirming that his drone was still tracking the HFY. He hesitated for a moment, knowing he should flee while he had the chance. But a morbid curiosity, mixed with a sense of responsibility for what was about to unfold, kept him rooted to the spot. The human's progress through the empty streets was relentless. Any aliens unfortunate enough to cross its path quickly scurried away, their survival instincts screaming danger. The few who were too slow or too foolish to move received swift, brutal treatment. Trefin watched in horror as the human effortlessly incapacitated a Cranks enforcer 3 times its size, the alien's tentacles no match for the human's augmented strength. As the human neared the warehouse, it pulled out a weapon unlike anything Trefin had ever seen. It hummed with barely contained energy, occasional arcs of blue electricity dancing along its barrel. The warehouse door stood no chance. With a thunderous boom, it was reduced to splinters. From his position, Trefin could just make out next tier's terrified screech from within the building. The sound was quickly drowned out by the staccato of weapons fire and the crash of breaking equipment. For several agonizing minutes, the sounds of destruction continued. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. Trefin held his breath, his sensitive ears straining for any sound. The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant wail of emergency sirens. Then, the human emerged from the warehouse. In one hand, it dragged the limp form of next tier, the HFY's once vibrant feathers now matted with blood and grime. The alien was still alive, letting out weak chirps of pain, but it was clear his fighting days were over. With mechanical precision, the human began to secure next tier to the exterior of the dropship. Trefin realized with growing horror that the HFY was to be subjected to a fate worse than a quick death. He was to be an example, a warning to all who would dare harm humanity. As the human finished its grim task, it paused. Slowly, deliberately, it turned its helmeted head towards Trefin's hiding spot. For a heart-stopping moment, Trefin was certain he had been spotted, but the human made no move towards him. Instead, it raised a hand in what might have been a salute or a warning. Then, without further ceremony, it boarded the ship. The dropship's engines roared to life, drowning out next tier's piteous cries. As it lifted off, Trefin could see the HFY's form dangling from the hull, a macabre trophy of human vengeance. The ship accelerated rapidly, punching through the atmosphere with the same reckless speed of its arrival. Within moments, it was nothing more than a fading speck in the sky, leaving behind a city in shock and a galaxy that would soon learn, once again, the terrible price of underestimating humanity. Trefin slumped against the rooftop's edge, his cybernetic legs whirring as they adjusted to his shifting weight. He knew that this was far from over. The human's message was clear: they were not to be trifled with, and their vengeance knew no bounds. As the twin suns of the alien world climbed higher in the sky, Trefin knew that a new era of fear had just dawned across the galaxy. And at its center was the undeniable truth: there is nothing more deadly than a human seeking what they call revenge. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you loved it. Please remember to subscribe if you did like it so you can see more videos like this. And please give us a like and a comment too. I'll see you in the next one.